guys, welcome back or welcome to my channel. If you're new, my name is Sarah, and if you're returning, it is lovely to see you again. So we are back for our October wrap up. I cannot believe we're at the end of October. It is getting to the busy season. I'm super duper excited. I just finished uni for the year, so I'm at that point where I can read a lot more, and I'm very excited to see what the next 2 months bring me. This month caught me by surprise. Not only is the amount of books I read this month, but also just the quality of books I read this month. And I'm not saying to do with rating necessarily. I mean the length of the book, the type of book I chose to read. I don't know, all in all, I was very proud of myself, particularly because I was literally finishing my uni semester. So to be able to read this many books this month is just phenomenal, and it just gives me so much hope that I'll get through so many more in November and December. So before I begin sharing with you guys what I've read in October, I thought it would be fun to kind of give you guys a little review of my reading month in numbers. So I chose 7 books in my TBR video, and out of those 7, 5 of them I read. One of them I chose to DNF, and I'll explain why later. The total books I read this month were 7, and all of them were part of a series. Technically one of them is a standalone, but the second book has been announced in the series, so I'm going to count that towards a series. And the genres of those books were 4 romance, 2 fantasy, and 1 thriller. So that's kind of a little synopsis. It was a crazy month. To read 7 books during one of the busiest months is just out of this world. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to share with you guys the books in order that I read them. First book for this month, which I did mention in my picking my October reads video, was Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. I gave this book a 4 stars. Now this was a solid 4-star read. I know for some people this is their 6-star read, their 5-star, their holy grail, best thing they've ever read. If you have not heard of this series, it follows 2 people in the first 2 books, Binding 13 and Keeping 13, and that is Johnny and Shannon. Shannon lives in a housing commission and is currently going through a lot personally, and Johnny is an up-and-coming rugby player, and they both attend Tom and College. Shannon moves to Tom and College, where Johnny also attends school at, because of her severe bullying that she was receiving in her previous school. I want to preface that this series and these 2 books particularly, because I haven't read the next 2 in the series, so I'm not too sure if there are any additional trigger warnings to what I'm about to discuss. Check the trigger warnings of this book off the top of my head. These books cover domestic violence, drugs, alcohol abuse, bullying, but very severe bullying, so I don't want anyone to go into these books thinking they're your sweet generic romance books, because they are not. They are great books to read, do not get me wrong, but the underlying storyline is very detailed, very graphic, and very hard to read at points. So please keep that in mind going into that series. Check the trigger warnings for yourself. I think it's really important to preface that before you go in the series, so please check the trigger warnings in this book. But I did thoroughly enjoy it. I felt like there was a lot of setting up, and I understand why there was a lot of setting up in this series. It's a very found family series, and I love that aspect. It's what I loved about the Knockbound series. So to kind of have another world like this, it is insane, and I was really enjoying reading it. I found it a bit long-winded at points, but Chloe Walsh's writing is just so easy to read. Like, this book is over 700 pages, and I found it so easy to read. It didn't feel like 700 pages, which is kind of what you want if you know a book's this thick. And that's what kind of brings me back to what I was saying at the start of this video, how I was really proud of myself this month. I've read that, okay? And then to go along with it, I read its buddy. It's partner in crime. I did read Keeping 13, you guys. When I say I'm proud of my achievements, I am proud of my achievements. Usually this would just be my 2 books for the month and we'd be done with this video, but no. Did I have to stop everything I was doing to finish these books? Yes. Did that impact my schedule? Yes. Am I ashamed of that? No, I'm not. I'm really not. This leads me on to the next book, obviously, that I read this month, which is Keeping 13, also by Chloe Walsh. It is the second book. It's kind of the duology to Shannon and Johnny's story. It's the final book to their story, and I gave this book a 4.75 stars. I definitely enjoyed it more than Binding 13, which is funny because I was speaking to my best friend Olivia, and she has read both of them as well, and she thought it was the opposite way around. She preferred Binding 13 over Keeping 13. I think it's very much preferable to the person who reads it, but I did enjoy this one better, I think, because their relationship was a lot more developed. There was a more developed plot line. It just made for a more interesting story. Obviously I'm not going to get into any of it because it will give away what occurred in Binding 13, and I could not forgive myself if I did that. But again, Same as Binding 13, check your trigger warnings. Then the next book I read this month, which honestly took me by surprise, I read it in a day, was The Hous Made by Frida McFadden. This was a book club pick with my friend Olivia. Not the same Olivia I was just talking about. I have 2 friends that are Olivia. It's so funny. But this is my book club Olivia. So her and I have book club, and this was my pick, her pick for me. December book club pick is she chooses a book for me and I choose a book for her. So I chose Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score for her. And I've read it, she hasn't. She's read The Hous Made by Frida McFadden, so she chose that for me because I hadn't read it at the time. I picked this up straight after finishing Keeping 13 the next day, and I was like, I'll get started. Sat there the whole day and read it. Do I have regrets? Absolutely not. It's a psychological thriller. You're insane if you think I'm going to bed without finishing this book. It was so good. This book I gave a 4.75 stars. It's funny, I think as I'm getting along in my reading journey a lot more, I'm being a lot more critical of how I rate a book. I wouldn't say it's a 5-star because I found it slow at points, and a 5-star read for me means I don't find it slow at any point in the book. Did I even read it? No, I didn't, because it was so fast. So that would be my only reason why it wasn't a 5 stars. The plot line to this book was insane. This book follows Millie, who is a housemaid for Nina Winchester. Millie has just gotten out of jail and she's looking for work, which she struggles to do so. Nina hires her, and her job is kind of to make sure the house is clean, make sure Cece, Nina's daughter, is well cared for. Nina is married to a man called Andrew, and together they live with Cece. Cece is not Andrew's biological daughter, but they are all obviously loving family from the outside. Throughout the progression of the book, you are following from Millie's POV. You are just watching Nina get stranger and stranger, and honestly, this book took a crazy turn. I did not think it was going to take a crazy turn. I did not expect it to take the turn it did. It was just a very well written book. Frida McFadden added information in at the perfect times. Like, for example, we don't find out why Millie went to jail until towards the end of the book, and the way Frida just dropped it in there as if it was nothing, my jaw dropped. It was so well done. If you are considering reading this book, I would highly recommend it. If you are like me and find psychological thrillers very terrifying, if you've read Verity by Colleen Hoover or The Silent Patient, I would honestly say this was not as scary as the other 2, in the sense that yes, it was still very graphic, but I didn't freak out as much as I did with the other 2. So if you like a good psychological thriller but don't want to be scared to death by it and can't read it in one sitting like I did, this would be a perfect book for you. But either way, if you have not read Verity or The Silent Patient, what are you doing with your life? Are you kidding me? Like, read it now. Then I finally got around to The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. This is the first book in the Billionaire series. The Fine Print follows Rowan and Zara. Rowan is one of the Kane brothers who is part of the massive corporate Kane business, and part of that business is Dreamland, which is owned and founded by his grandfather. His grandfather passed away, which is what you are introduced to at the beginning of the book, and so because of this, in his will, each of the 3 brothers receive a letter. In the letter, all of them are given tasks that they must complete, and for Rowan it is an 18% share in the company. The way to receive his share of the company is he must work at Dreamland as the director for 6 months and create a project which will revolutionize the company. The project itself will then be approved or rejected by a board of people selected by the grandfather before his death, and so that is where Zara comes in. As part of finding the kind of project that will revolutionize the park, Rowan puts out a survey to all the workers in the park to see what he can do to improve it, and Zara puts in a junk proposal of, I think it was all the negative things that one of the rides in the park has, and she puts in a drunk proposal of the improvements that could be made to a ride in the park, which you find out why she has so much hate towards this ride later on, which is kind of funny. And in her doing the proposal, Rowan saw the creativeness, the flair, the drive that Zara possessed, and so he put her on the creators team, which is kind of like the architects, the creators of rides and different areas of the park, and then that's where you follow the story from basically. And I gave this book a 3-star. Wasn't anything spectacular, it wasn't anything terrible, but I just honestly couldn't connect to the characters as well as I normally do. I don't know what it was. I wouldn't say they're terrible characters. I really did like Rowan and Zara. I just found It wasn't anything crazy or life-changing. I will continue this series because I do see the potential, and the plot lines of the two other brothers, from hearing what their letters were at the start of the book, really intrigued my interest. So I'm still very excited to continue on with this series, and I know for some people the second and third book are a lot better. I would still recommend this series. Then the next book I read this month was Powerless by Lauren and Robert. This book was a highly anticipated read for me. I know it was for so many other people. I've heard rave reviews about it. Sophie Miller, who is a YouTuber, she created an Instagram channel and she does like a little book club pick each month, and this was the first one that we all chose, and I obviously wanted to read alongside them all. I gave this book a 3.5 stars. The main protagonist is Peyton Gray, and she is an ordinary who blends in with the elites as a psychic. So elites are people with powers, and there was a plague a couple years ago where the king killed off anyone who was not an elite, so someone who didn't possess any power, because it was proven that they were making the elites sick. And so there's a stigma that elites will need to be separated and kept away from ordinaries. So all the ordinaries are supposedly purged, but that is not the case. Obviously Peyton is one of them, and there still are some out there. And since the purging, they have created these purging trials each year, which is a competition showcasing elites' powers, and that is where Peyton finds herself after saving the Prince of Valia, who is Kai, and Kai is another character you follow in this book. And I did enjoy this book. It gave Hunger Games vibes, like Hunger Games to the max. It even gave a little bit of the Selection vibes in the sense of like the balls and things like that, but Hunger Games, and even I would say ACOTAR a little bit with the trials and tribulation kind of situation. But I wouldn't say it was a terrible book at all. I just think the writing was a bit long-winded at points, and sometimes it felt like it was very repetitive. But I did love the dual POV, and I did actually really enjoy how Lauren wrote the book, and when you switched POVs you weren't getting repetitive information. If it was the same scene, it was from a different perspective, so it was new information. And I really thoroughly appreciate that, because some books do dual perspective, but you are just hearing the repeat of the story from the other person's perspective. Like, it is traumatizing. Yeah, I didn't have necessarily anything bad to say. I just didn't necessarily enjoy it as much as other fantasy books, but I will still recommend it to anyone. I will still pick up the next one, because my other logical thought behind my lower rating is sometimes the first book in a fantasy series, setting it up, it gets really boring and it's slow because it's world building, it's preparing you for the rest of the series. So I think that probably played an important role in its kind of lower rating. So we'll see how the next book goes, but yet again I'm still very excited to read it. And then the final book, which I don't have on me, it's kind of tucked away with the books I'm giving away. It's Love Your Life by Sophie Kinsella, I believe that's the title. I'll put the cover up next to me. I don't know, I bought this book 2 years ago and I've had it on my shelf and I've been excited to read it, but I just have never been in the mood to read it. So it's been on my shelf for so long and I just couldn't do it. Honestly, if I'm being honest, I think it was one of those books where if I had read it when I bought it, it would have been a different story, but because I've taken so long to read it and start it, I've had so many other books I'm more intrigued in. So I just kind of went, no, I'm not going to do that to myself. This year I've tried to be more conscious of DNFing or getting rid of books I don't want to make room for different books that I want to read and enjoy, and I don't want to feel guilty for it. So that is the one book that I did not read and actually ended up giving away. So yeah, that was that. The only book I didn't read this month was Hooked by Emily McIntyre. I just ended up switching to some other books, which you will see in a second. So the next book I'm going to be talking about is Daisy Hates by Jessa Hastings. So I started a video, which will be out after these videos, of me finishing books that I had started. This was one of the books. If you don't know this book, this series, it is the second installment of the Magnolia Parks universe, but is the first book for Daisy Hates. And I read Magnolia Parks at the beginning of this year or end of last year, and I gave that book a 4-star. Looking back, I probably would have given it a 3.5. I just found that book was very character driven rather than having an underlying plot, but I'm also holding out hope that because it was kind of an introductory book, the upcoming Magnolia Parks book will have a lot more plot line to it, particularly after reading Daisy Hates. So I gave Daisy Hates a solid 4 stars. I enjoy reading about Daisy more than I do Magnolia. I think she's got more to her. There's a bigger underlying plot. It's just a lot more intriguing and interesting. If you don't know the series, Daisy is the sister of Julian, who is a notorious crime lord in London, and it kind of follows their gang's journey in art. art. They kind of specialize in art, I believe, like selling, the stealing and selling of art. It follows her journey with her brother and like their gang family, but also her relationships individually. It's just like, it's a whole thing. There's a lot of trauma in here, so I would definitely check some trigger warnings because there were a few scenes in here where it's not for the faint-hearted. Let's just say that. So check the trigger warnings. But I did enjoy this book and I am excited to continue on with this series. Then the final book I am going to speak about this month is Shadow Kiss by Hous Made. This is the third installment of the Vampire Academy series. I gave this book a 3 stars. This series is a YA series, and so I think if you followed my channel for a while, you know me and YA is very hit or miss. So sometimes I love the books in YA, other times they're just too young for me. And this series, it's, yes, I can see the YA elements of it, but I'm still enjoying the plot of it. So it's a solid 3. It's a solid 3 stars. It's not terrible 3 stars. I really do enjoy it. And so I think I gave Frostbite, which is the second book in the series, a 4 stars. Yeah, I gave Frostbite 4 stars. It's purely because Rochelle's writing style is very free-flowing, but when she writes fight scenes, they are so entertaining and so intriguing. Like, your heart is pounding, you're so nervous. And the second book had more kind of drama, fighting kind of thing, so I think that's why I gave it a higher rating. But honestly, I love this book. It's halfway through the series now. They've got 3 books left, so it's definitely like the turning point in the series where things are starting to pick up and things are amplifying, and it left it on a very big cliffhanger, so I'm very intrigued to see where the next book takes me. Very excited to read it. If you haven't read the series, it follows 2 girls, Rose and Lisa. Lisa is a Moroi. Rose is a Dampfire. Dampfire is a combination of a Moroi and a human. A Moroi is a like living vampire, and then there's a Strigoi, which is a dead vampire who don't have a soul. And so you kind of follow their journey individually and as a pair. It's all from Rose's perspective, but obviously you're still hearing the stories of other characters and their journeys. And yeah, there's a love interest in there. Obviously it's very fantasy driven. It's just something different that I didn't expect to read. I only picked up the series because it was at the Lifeline book fair and the whole series was there, and it was so stupid of me not to pick it up. Yeah, it's just a nice easy read, and I think that's what I enjoy about it, is I can pick it up when I've got things going on that I know I don't have time to read something very thought heavy, because I'm kind of this far into the series that I can remember what a Strigoi is, what a Moroi is, what a Dampfire is, what all the other kind of people are, because it does get a bit confusing at times, but Rochelle is always good at reminding you of who is who and what is what in the books. So for the first 2 books, she's constantly reiterating who's who, what's this, what does this mean for you, but by the 3rd book you kind of get the grasp and the gist of it, which is really good. So those are the 7 books I read this month. I had such a good reading month. I cannot wait to see what November brings. Thank you if you've made it this far in the video. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please give a big thumbs up because it really supports my channel. Subscribe if you are new, and I'll see you all in my next video very soon. Bye guys.